So the question I have is, were you born this way? I'm serious. Were you simply born with a courageous nature? You were prepared to give up everything. I mean, that's a fact. And they could have really ruined your life, the authorities in the draconian state of California. So what do you think when you look at yourself? In other words, were you like this at 12? Did you have a revelation at 22? How do you explain you?
I was very self-centered and selfish, young. I was committed.
Shocking.
Yeah.
None of us start that way.
Yeah. I was an athlete, so I knew discipline. But I grew up in Coronado, California, which is a Navy town. My dad was a Navy captain, 2 or 3 tours of Vietnam. We weren't a church-going family, but my dad ran for city council. My mom was president of Republican Women. My dad was president of Rotary. We walked precincts. We participated in campaigns. I grew up with that. I was a Republican longer than before I was a Christian. And I watched their involvement in the community, and I was touched by it. And my mom was patriotic, and it touched her life. And then I would meet guys at our Christmas party every year. I remember Admiral Stockdale. With his leg that was broken, sticking straight out, and the party was so crowded that we'd have to have a walkway for people to get around. My godfather, who I'm named after, Rear Admiral Robert Broussard Early, was, at the time, he died at 100, but at the time, he was the highest ranking survivor of the attack on Pearl Harbor. He was a lieutenant on the USS Cassin, December 7th, 1941. And I had gone for a run for the assembly, just following in my parents' footsteps after I realized I have a responsibility when I became a man. And that was a conversion to Christ. I had an awakening. So I'm running for the assembly, and I don't know my elbow from my earlobe when it comes to politics, but I couldn't take people where I wasn't willing to go myself. And my own party is carpet bombing me in the primary. The party I'd been a part of my entire life. And I was going to miss my godfather's 100th birthday. And he was living in Coronado in the house he'd lived in for 50 years. And my mother had died of lung cancer. My father was in a home with Alzheimer's. He was the patriarch of the family for all intents and purposes. So I don't have any money left to contend. I don't want to go out to my mailbox and see another vicious mailer. And I drive down to Coronado, and I'm discouraged. And I sit down with him, and he was still driving at 99. Not well, but he was driving. And he'd do 100 sit-ups through the entire day because he said movement was life. And he looked at me with this booming voice, and he said, "How's it going?" And I said, "Uncle Bob, I'm out of money. I'm getting carpet bombed by my own party. I feel like I've led these folks on a rosy road to nowhere, and I'm complaining." And he puts his hand up, and it's shaking with age. And I'd never heard him angry in 50 years, and I'm named after him. He puts his hand up while I'm whining, and he goes, "Stop it!" It paralyzed me. There's nothing like being spanked by a 99-year-old man. And he looks at me and says, "You don't know tough." I was 16 years old in the Great Depression. We didn't know where our next meal was going to come from. And had it not been an appointment to the Naval Academy, I would have never received a college degree. And you, Rob, being a history major, don't realize this, but we had, I think he said, the 17th largest military on the face of the earth because we were in isolationist mode. And he said that day, December 7th, 1941, they sank half our Pacific fleet and they sank my ship. The harbor was on fire and I was pulling my shipmates out of the harbor dead. And the next day we took on a 2-fronted war against 2 fascist nations. Brought them to their knees. He said they lifted that Pacific fleet from the bottom of the ocean and floated into Tokyo Harbor for the surrender. And then he said this, I'll never forget it. "We were liberators, not occupiers. We asked for only enough ground to bury our dead and we came home. We cut federal spending and we started the greatest industrial revolution in your lifetime." He said, "So quit whining and go finish what you started." We've had 244 years of unprecedented freedom. Why am I going to deny my children and my grandchildren? Our cowardice is selfish because a nation grows great whose citizens plant trees of the shade they'll never know. It's not about you and me. It's about the ones behind us. And I saw that in that man and in my dad. Memorial Day 74, 75. My dad says, get in the car. And I was 9, 10 years old. And he had been in Vietnam. And I was the youngest of 4 kids by 7 years. I didn't know this man. He was always gone in my formative years. We're driving in the car, and I wanted to hang out with my friends for the 3-day weekend. And we drive from Coronado north on the 5 freeway, and we get to Pendleton. I don't know where we're going. We go through the gate. They get a crisp salute from the Marine at the guard gate because my dad's a Navy captain. They see the bird. And we drive into the bowels of Pendleton, and we come to this sea of tents as far as I've ever seen. My dad says, get out. And we walk down, and there's a table with a bunch of card files and more Marines. They salute my father, and he gives them a piece of paper. They look through the files, and they said, tent, whatever. And we walk through a sea of Vietnamese as far as the eye can see. Smells and sounds I've never known. We get to the tent, and Major Nguyen comes out. He salutes my father, and he says, Major, there's no place for that now. Your family, we're going home. He says, Captain, I've married since we talked. He says, get your wife, let's go. And out comes Mrs. Nguyen. She was from a rural village, didn't speak any English. Major Nguyen did because he had dealings with my father in Vietnam. We get in the car, my father and the major in the front, I'm in the back with Mrs. Nguyen, and I'm just trying to make her smile and joke, and she's scared and nervous. We get home. I'm sorry. We get home, and Mrs. Nguyen is a newlywed. She wants to please her husband. She's in a new home, and my parents had just remodeled the kitchen. And my mother was meticulous. She would vacuum, and you'd have to fly from one room to the next not to make footsteps in the lines in the carpet. And my mom would not permit fried food or the smell of it in the house. And Mrs. Nguyen is frying fish. And it catches fire. And she does what any woman in a rural village would do. She kicks it into the ground, catches fire on the carpet. She's panicking. She's embarrassed. My mom puts the fire out, and I'm thinking, you are going to die. And my mother does nothing. And I'm confused. And I turned to her later and I said, Mom, why didn't you get angry? She said, Rob, they lost their country. We can replace the carpet. That's America. That's why I am who I am. I've had heroes. History has inspired me. Lives have touched me. That's why I love you.
I'm glad I asked.